call roll.
Davis,
Here.
Jimenez,
Present.
Kame,
Here.
Cohen,
Here.
have quorum.
All right. So first item is the agenda for the April 4th meeting. Right. 9:30 closed session, 1:30 regular session. Send calendars on pages 5 and 6. I think there's 9 items. Or 8. Section 3, IGR report. Review of the pension and healthcare plan actuarial evaluations. Section 5.1, major street paving. Items 7.1 and 7.2, both deferred. Item 7.3, the cost sharing agreement for Coyote Creek.
Hey, Chair, is it appropriate to ask a question about a deferral?
When we get back to discussion, we will.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Those are the only items. There's only a few items on the agenda. So we'll go to public comment and then come back to committee discussion.
Blair Beekman,
Hi, Blair Beekman here. There is an echo. Oh, you know why? I'm very sorry. I have my that echo should be gone now. Sorry about that. To first ask hi to everyone today. I first ask is to talk about the future of the deferral process. Shouldn't that be before public comment? Just as a thought, so I can better decide how to talk about issues if needed. So to go on, I wanted to talk about, I think for this agenda, there is a deferral as usual on digital equity issues that will finally be addressed April 11th, hopefully. But I think it's been a good deferral process in that I hope yourselves have been really preparing and better understanding as a new council and administration what to ask about and think about with digital equity issues. To again remind, as important as we'll be talking about the needs of bridging the digital divide and the importance of those issues, we can't do that work. We can't be installing future broadband without really good accountable practices with that work and accountable placement of that work. And that means civil rights ideas, that means civil protections and how to place the future of digital 5G. And we have to be honest about that. We can't just dump in the 5G. We have to have good civil rights and civil protection practices with that. And that comes accountability asks of broadband installers, making sure their notification process is clear. And we have to work on that. And those are the sorts of things. That's how you build the digital divide issues for our future. That's our good future. It's a combined effort.
back to the committee.
Move approval of the April 4th agenda with the ad sheet.
Second.
All right, were there questions? I think Councilmember Jimenez, you had a question.
Yeah, I had a question. I was wondering if someone can comment on why 7.2 is being deferred.
I can do that, Councilmember. Lee Wilcox, Assistant City Manager. The community group working on this project wanted an additional 2 weeks.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? If not, we'll take a vote.
Davis,
Yes.
Jimenez,
Yes.
Kame,
Yes.
Foley,
Aye.
Cohen,
Aye.
motion passes.
All right, carries 5-0. We'll now the next item is the agenda for April 11th. And the normal start times of 9:30 and 1:30.
Yeah, we would like to cancel the evening session. The land use items have all been noticed for 1:30.
Okay, good. All right, so we have a few pages of consent. Through item 15, and then wage theft policy. Coming back. Closure of Spring Street and Asbury Street, section 5.1, 5.2, a support program for Spirit Airlines. Page 12, we have the digital equity item coming after. That's the 1 week deferral from the 4th. And then we have land use, 3 items on consent for land use. Then items 10.2, 10.3. I did have a question about 10.2. Is that one, it says to be heard before 10.1, so we would hear the general plan review before the consent items, and then come to consent, and then go to 10.3. And all
Correct.
those would happen at the end of the regular agenda.
Councilmember, that is correct. So 10.2 does need to be heard before consent.
Okay.
Because they are conforming with the general plan amendments and the review that you'll be voting on 10.2. So you need to do those first.
All right, great, thanks. Okay, we'll go to public comment.
Paul Soto,
Yes, good afternoon. I'd like to talk about digital equity and the delayed kind of hesitation on the part of the city to really center that issue that historically has existed. And what I mean by historically existed within the school systems and the infrastructure is that one of the deficiencies that was created by redlining was inadequate schools, inadequate resources in those schools. And this was very, very clearly articulated in Diaz versus San Jose Unified School District. The symptoms of that. So we're talking 1971, that's when that case was filed. Judge Manley was the one that argued that. So what you're doing is you're dragging your feet, and in the next sentence, you're going to talk about, well, we're not racist. We're not, no, of course not. No, nobody here is. Well, you don't really have to be a self-professed one. All you have to do is not address these historical deficiencies that have existed in certain areas of this city. And you have implicitly perpetuated a racist policy because that is what had created those deficiencies in the first place. So it's very simple. It's not rocket science or anything like that. But what you do is you destroy any credibility that you have with the public when you do not make it a priority to do what is necessary and what is deserving for those particular schools and those children.
Blair Beekman,
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I wanted to talk about a few items on this agenda. One is bridge maintenance and asset management. Thank you. Those are really good practices of upkeep for preparing for community emergencies and disasters in our future. That's the good work that we talk about here openly in San Jose. Thank you. Item is 3.3 is wage theft prevention. That will bring back these issues from that was deferred yesterday. I wanted to quickly mention a reminder of the importance of the subcontractor process, a word I could not say yesterday for some reason. Good luck on how wage theft issues, we can really start to address the subcontractor issue. It's an important combination how to address our future, and good luck in all the work that we're doing, really good work, hopefully with wage theft things in our future. Thank you. I wanted to mention the temporary closures for Spring Street and just good luck in the RV safe parking program for our future San Jose. And another quick thought about digital equity, along with Vision Zero, Vision Zero has the same issues. We want public safety a lot, but it's important to have good civil protections and civil rights and open public policies with the tech that's going in. The same sort of principle applies to the future bridging the digital divide. Good luck with that. And to conclude, you have issues about storm runoff things that we've been dealing with. I hope we're really learning to understand that there's Bay Area sea level rise issues going on that we really need to acknowledge that's really starting to happen, and that this will help address those issues that, boy, we just have to be open and honest about sea level rise around the Bay.
Back to the committee.
All right, thank you. Any comments from the committee?
Move approval with the cancellation of the evening session.
Second.
All right, I guess we'll move to a vote.
Davis,
Yes.
Jimenez,
Yes.
Kame,
Yes.
Foley,
Aye.
Cohen,
Aye.
motion passes.
All right, carries 5-0. So we're on to the consent calendar. We'll go to the public comment.
Blair Beekman,
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I wanted to comment, there was a few items I wanted to comment on the consent calendar about. One is, I got to run to it here. One is, Councilperson Foley is going to have a budget meeting coming up soon. And I just wanted to quickly comment that, in the budget work, I think there is a real importance to the COPA issues and how it can be addressing the future of, I don't know what was mentioned at the meeting a couple of days ago, but the displacement, just housing needs overall. There was a few items, there's a few ways to talk about it. It's an important issue that I think really has to be better talked about than it currently is. And I hope we make those efforts to want to be honest about what it really can help with and a future it can help build. And good luck in those efforts, how to have that conversation and still have disagreements about things, but I'm hopeful. There was an item about, I guess the other item was public record, and that I was really surprised to learn that smash and grabs are happening once again in the Little Saigon area. And I just want to offer, support and sympathy and help for, the people who are suffering from this. And that, the people who are doing these smash and grabs, I mean, they feel they have some sort of new pass to do something weird and crazy, and they think they're getting away with something really cool. But it's not. It's really, it's hurtful to what you're doing to the community. And I hope this can be a time that we're starting to really say no to such explosionary tactics as some form of real coolness. I think there are real better ways to develop ourselves as a community than doing those sort of things. And I really hope these people are learning their lesson and learning to stop, like we all are, about issues. Let's do it cool, guys. Let's be cool. Thanks for your time. Good luck to people.
Paul Soto, Paul Soto,
Yes, thank you. Two things. I don't know the relationship, like what makes Kappa Phi Psi or whatever the fraternity is. I'm not clear on what, like out of all the fraternities, this particular one is going to get resources from the city in order to support their fraternity. So I'm just very unclear on that, and I'd like some clarification on what makes them different than any other fraternity. That's number one. Number two is that, well, I appreciate, the smash and grabs and it's crime, and people go where there's affluence. They're not going to go to poorer neighborhoods. They're going to go where people have the money. So it's understandable from that point of view. What isn't clear is there was no statistics in the report that Cortese is submitting to support that. Like in terms of a disproportionate, because usually these types of crimes happen in waves. There'll be like a rash of them, and then they'll stop. And so what I'm not clear on is if those things are happening, those things happen around the city. I mean, crime happens all over the city. And so when one particular community is able to access power and leverage that power in order to get a city resource, other people in the city that don't have that power and can't leverage that kind of clout because they don't have the money, all of a sudden their neighborhoods stay unprotected? These are legitimate questions that have to be asked.
Back to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Chair, I'd like to request an amendment to a friendly amendment. Item 5 actually should state March 20th as the date of our town hall, which was last Monday, not the 21st.
Oh,
Happy to
okay.
accept that amendment.
So there's a second then?
Yes. Same here.
Okay. So we have the amended consent calendar moved. We'll take a vote.
Davis,
Yes.
Jimenez,
Yes.
Kame,
Yes.
Foley,
Aye.
Cohen.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, that brings us to open forum.
Blair Beekman,
All right, thank you. Really nice words by Paul Soto on that last item. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm new at trying to offer support for, merchants and everyday people themselves, how they have to deal with crime issues. And I'm giving my support to the process, and I would hate to think my words are being taken advantage of, as Paul has described. My beliefs in accountable practices. We may not need all that much extra technology for what's going on right now, but these are the ways that people ask for more technology when it may not be needed. So thanks a lot for Paul's words, and my words themselves were not very good, and I'm very sorry to everyone for that. But there's a shock value involved in smash and grabs that's new to us, and that's part of its ploy and its excitement of and how people get away with it. I wish people just not work in that way anymore. And just realize it's not that shocking. It's just depressing, and it's depressing as a society that we live that way. And I hope criminals take that to heart and develop different ways to. It hurts when people lose their things, and it's not so easy. And as we try to make it to be, as we try to put up with just this sort of issues of crime, and put on a smiley face and say it's okay, be cool, you can get away with it. It's not that cool. It's not that fun, but we're trying our best to be compromising to some pretty hurtful people. So good luck how we can address this issue and towards positiveness, good things. Good luck in those efforts. And with that, really consider peace and dialogue before continual war in the Ukraine area. Man, just dialogue, negotiation, all the good stuff. If we learn how to do that, then we're being human beings. Thank you.
Paul Soto,
Yes, I think there's a cultural difference sometimes when we talk about crime and punishment. The ultimate of smash and grabs was when the pioneers came to California and declared war against Mexico, when San Jose was Mexican land. That was the ultimate of smash and grabs, takeovers, and impunity. So what I do want to talk about is kind of related to that, is that I really wanted to extend my gratitude and respect for the way that Vice Mayor Kamei centered her position with respect to COPA. Because I I don't care if somebody agrees with me or not. I don't care about that at all, because what I bring can stand on its own. So I don't care if somebody agrees with it. But the logic and the reasoning that you applied to the position and clearly outlined very simply all of these deficiencies, and those deficiencies were intentionally there. So sometimes we have to pay attention as a community, not to what's being said, but what isn't being said. And because there is so much money involved, so much greed, and so much fear and competition, that I don't trust anybody. I don't trust my government. I don't trust any nonprofits. I don't trust them to do the right thing. No, so there's going to be some basic assumptions that there's already going to be something in the weeds that needs to be accounted for. And I saw that with the vice mayor, and I saw that with Batra, and I knew that Batra would be doing what he's doing now because he's an engineer. That was critically important for my vote in support of him there. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're adjourned. See you next week.